La 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 la. Hello, Saturday.
What's happening, guys? Welcome to Think Fast.
Again, just why don't we start from scratch? Like, why don't you just
Does an
open this
episode?
episode
Why
normally?
can an episode not start without me? How can it start without me surprising you? I don't know if you have
Yes,
copyright
but
for
why
this,
don't
but
you
hello,
surprise me
hi,
with
hi,
interesting things the
hi,
next time around?
hi,
Like,
hi.
like,
If you're watching
oh
YouTube,
God,
you can see
now
me like
what is
randomly
this?
holding like Hulk severed head at Suchita.
That's great. Varun is back with his toys, guys. He's graduated from OnlyFans to now
Yes,
inanimate objects. You're back
yes,
to
the
where you
toys.
started.
I
Appreciate
just
your
have to.
humble beginnings.
I have to talk to you about this. When
What?
we were discussing this episode, we were like, it's a lean week. And then we suddenly came to this avalanche of things to talk about. And suddenly we have a lot to talk about this week.
But I think that's with like basically this whole year so far, where when
That's
when
true.
we guys are sharing stories. So listeners, what Varun and I do is on Slack, we guys ping stories to each other, and then we figure out what are we going to talk about,
Poor
on
Lasmi
a
has to
particular
figure out how
episode.
to get stuff out of that for us to talk about.
Exactly. And every single week we begin by saying, "Is hafte to kuch nahi hai, nothing has happened, there's no decacorn, no unicorn, no funding, no nothing." But we still ramble on and on in
Yeah,
every episode. It's great. It's great.
it's amazing. What happened this week? What happened this week? Lok Sabha passed the finance bill, which kind of is, taking from the budget earlier in the year.
Yeah.
Basically, investors will get taxed more heavily from April. In a nutshell, there are a few more salient points there, but we've already done a deep dive on the entire piece out of the budget with Mr. Anupam Gupta. So you can go back to that episode to check. But so that's happened. What else happened? Okay, why is this news? Wala news. Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz has stepped down earlier than expected. How much earlier?
Schultz.
Please answer. Schultz, how much
Two
earlier?
weeks. Only two
Wow!
weeks.
Oh my God!
Oh
दो
my
हफ्ते
God.
दो हफ्ते पहले कलयुग आ गया. Like, what is happening? Like, why is this news?
But I feel
Why?
like everyone's running out of things to talk about. You know what I mean? And I know we guys are going to get to this in just a bit, but the Byju's and Unacademy merger, hoga nahi hoga, like just unnecessary table tennis matches in
Yeah.
between two publications. I just feel like
Yeah.
people are inventing shit at this point in time to keep
Yeah.
news cycles interesting because
But
SVB
my
was
interest.
not enough.
The interesting part about this whole story of him stepping down 2 weeks earlier was that there's a related story. This is a quad story that we're referring to, which is Starbucks workers welcome their new CEO with a strike ahead of the company's annual meeting. So it's like he's had to hit the ground running. But I'm gathering he's already would have taken over a large amount of of day-to-day operations. So again, why is this
Yeah.
news?
And he's also been there for a while. And also India Zindabad. I get very happy
Ek aur.
when like
Lakshman
Indians prosper.
Narasimhan,
Love it.
South
Love
Indian rock.
it.
South Indians
May
rocking
there be
everywhere.
more.
South Indians everywhere.
Yes, this is a decade of you, Varun. This is a decade of you.
All because of me. All because of me. And also because of me, what else has happened? Because of me. No, not really because of me. Amazon is in advanced talks to acquire MX Player, which the video player owned by Times Internet. This is like a full offload from Times Internet, right? We've had like so many, like there was Ghana, you mentioned before we started recording
Yeah.
Ghana, then
Also, MX Takatak was sold to ShareChat, I think
I
earlier
think
this
so.
year or like late last year. And of course, Men's XP, IDEVA, etc., were acquired by Mensa. Also, I think announced late last year, early this year, one of the two. But yeah, Times really seems to be offloading all of their loss-making assets over to other interested players. This deal hasn't gone through. Again, this is rumor mill, so God alone
Yeah.
knows if this is actually legit or not.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah.
it's on trend for Times Internet because they anyway have been doing this step by step across all their platforms, everything that they own.
You asked an interesting question earlier, which is what is the use case of Amazon and MX Player, given Amazon
Yeah.
Prime already has enough, pretty kick-ass content, and unlike others, they've had their head on their shoulders. You know what I mean? Like they've been
Yeah.
pretty regional first, invested in multilingual content. What do you think is the TLDR of this potential rumor mill acquisition?
If you look at MX Player's content, and I was thinking about it, like for the last like 5 minutes before, which I said this. It's MX Player has had very like low. I wouldn't say lower grade, but I would say slightly um, B
Marcier.
grade, massier, not really premium. Or let me put that. Let me call it B grade. Let me say not necessarily premium content. And
Hmm.
Amazon might just has a strong set of people who do consume massy content, and you can see that
Hmm.
by a lot of the regional content they acquire. They acquire really massy
Hmm.
movies, etc. All that stuff. This may be focused on targeting that, but I still don't know how this makes sense unless it's like a throwaway price, which
Hmm.
it actually might be.
So, just a quick question: what shows does MX Player have? Like, what have been their noteworthy shows?
I think they had this one show with Bobby Deol, if I'm right, which has done well for them. I forget the name of it. I think it's called
Bobby
Ashram, if I
Deol.
remember. Bobby Deol's
Oh
had a
my
show called
god.
Ashram that's been doing well. I don't know if it's on this or not. I will have to check that. I
Yeah.
know that's done well for them. There are a few other shows as well they've done over the years, but nothing. And this is, I think, also in the subscription base, you're actually seeing this with a lot of the OTTs in India. Is that there was a time when there was so many OTTs, everybody had an OTT in that sense. You're seeing them slowly kind of go away. You've
Yeah.
had like Alt Balaji go into rebrand into Alt, which is basically Alt double T, is what it's called
Hmm.
now.
Oh,
You're seeing a lot of their
Twitter.
shows now.
Okay.
Alt, and it's showing up a lot more on YouTube now. Some of their content showing
Interesting.
up on YouTube. They had a syndication deal with Z5 for a bit. So it,
Hmm.
in a sense, you're also seeing a lot of people who went into the subscription space not really stick to it because everybody who wants to subscribe is either getting it through a bundle, which is your
Yeah.
your mobile operator bundle, or you're subscribing to, let's say, Netflix, etc., and stuff like that. So I feel that's really the an interesting thing to think about, is the fact that is it because the entire model doesn't work in India because you the basic amount that someone's okay to pay for a subscription content in India is so
Hmm.
much lower than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, and we discussed this even in that Disney Plus Hotstar episode,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Where
yeah.
it takes a whole other beast. I don't know what MX Player was trying to be. I don't know if they were trying to be like the YouTube of India or a Sasta Tikao high scale
No, they were an
Netflix.
OTT. They were in the similar space as to what your
Hmm.
Z5, etc. were. The only difference is
Got it.
Z5, Voot, everybody else had a TV network behind them. Um,
Hmm.
this one didn't. It was only the Times network, and so
Yeah.
didn't necessarily, you didn't know where to put it. They did really push out there. They used a lot of their sales might to kind of get people onto the platform, but it never really saw. I mean, you never really saw what it was like. I mean,
Yeah.
my I remember once, and I remember vividly because the reason why I said MX Player, if the quality of content what is that I think there was a summit for women leaders,
Hmm.
which I was attending, and MX Player I think was one of the sponsors, and I think one of the shows they played was a bunch of girls who are trying to get married, and they're talking about how one is fat and one is thin and one is. I'm like, this is like you have sponsored. That is the show trailer you pick to
Oh
put.
God.
Yes.
Great
So hence
timing,
I rest
great
my
timing.
case.
Must have gone down very well at that
I
summit.
rest.
Uh,
Everybody
but
had
in
this
other
like look of
news,
like, and it kept playing because there was a
the same.
sponsor. It kept playing between every session,
Oh man,
not just once,
Jesus.
many times.
Okay,
But anyway,
what's next?
moving on from the next player, AI officially enters the classroom. Khan Academy develops a GPT-4 based assistant. This is really interesting, right? Because we often talk about, we've been talking about AI coming into different spaces. We actually had a very interesting, Adobe announced a very interesting AI tool as well yesterday.
Correct.
But,
Yeah.
but I feel that Khan Academy one is interesting because it almost becomes like your teaching assistant for
Hmm.
every single person who has signed up for Khan Academy. And Khan Academy is anyway like a non-profit, right? It's not like
Yeah.
it's not like making them pay for it, but I feel this is a good use case. They obviously
Hmm.
spoke about the fact that they figured almost ways for this not to be used to cheat in exams and stuff like that, which all students will use. But you're also seeing almost very like, it might sound like a basic use case, but I'm just thinking that if you actually had an AI assistant to kind of work with when you study something, when you're in
Hmm.
school, um, how helpful that could have actually been.
Yeah.
And I think there is something to that. There's something to kind of think about with that. But did you see the
Interesting.
Adobe one?
AI goes everywhere. No, I haven't seen it yet, but Dhruv was talking to me about it in
It's
the
crazy.
morning
It's
as
basically
usual. I
you want to
glazed over.
kind of create an image, right? You're looking for a
Yeah.
certain image, you literally type out the kind of image you want, and it generates it
And it
for you, which
generates
is
it
like
for you. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
amazing. It's like great use
But
cases.
But I feel like I mean at this point it's more featureization of
Yeah,
AI versus
it is.
versus anything else. But there's a really interesting conversation. I haven't finished hearing it, otherwise I would have recommended it, in between Sam Altman and Kara Swisher,
Hmm.
which actually is totally worth a listen. Was it Sam Altman and Kara Swisher, or I'm forgetting? But Sam Altman gave a fairly good interview, and I know he has an episode coming up. My bad, with Kara Swisher on
Hmm.
her podcast. But it's interesting how they're thinking about chat gpt, the future of it, because if you see what other ai competitors are doing, they're sort of like recreating the hoopla around chat gpt, right? But
Hmm. Hmm.
true disruption in use cases actually comes by finding these almost fringe use cases that end up driving large scale adoption, versus for
Hmm.
example right now where it's a little bit of like chat gpt ने ये किया है तो bard google हम भी ये करते हैं,
Correct.
but yeah, but this space is going to be interesting to watch over the next couple of months.
Yeah, and this is anyway going to be what do you call it? Like you said, it's a foundational element of everything. Like how everybody used to say, every company is now a digital company. Now every
Yeah,
company is an AI company, right?
internet company, yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
that.
Hundo.
Interestingly, and I can't believe I'm bringing up Gary Vee in our podcast, but I occasionally go down the Gary Vee YouTube channel rabbit hole, and he makes a lot of sense in many cases. One of the things he said is that
Hmm.
everybody likes to think of catchphrases. Everybody said last year that Web3 has come and it's blockchain. You first said blockchain crypto, then you said it was NFTs. You spoke about VR, you spoke about all that stuff. Now you're saying AI.
Yeah.
What you are not saying is that all of these are part of Web3. This is all of them
Hmm.
together. However the balance works out, whatever becomes foundational will become Web3. Can we just stop talking about them as separate things, but they're actually all part of one thing, which is Web3, which I think from a macro point of view makes sense.
Yes it does, yes it does.
So I was saying, speaking of things that which don't make sense, have you seen Ashneer Grover's announcement for CricPe, his new platform?
Dude, have you seen Ashneer Grover, like in general? Apparently, I think you shared this article or someone else did. He's been telling people to not use his fat pictures and only use his most recent pictures where
First of
what
all,
the hell
this is called fat
was
shaming
that?
yourself. Why are you fat shaming yourself, Ashneer?
I
Mr. Grover?
don't know. Oh God, but he was also extremely obnoxious with the Ankur Wariku, which was a little.
What
It
happened?
just
I
wasn't
didn't
asked
see that.
for. I saw this like small snippet again. Maybe he corrected himself later on in the conversation, so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because I didn't end up seeing all 10 minutes of the full shindig. But basically, I think he was at some college or something, and some student would have asked him. Uh, you know, Founders like you and Ankur Wariku are now becoming influencers and are and are trying to be very popular and chasing fame and this, that, and the other. And he went on this like 2.5 minute tirade about how don't put me in the same sentence as Ankur Wariku. How can you put me in the same sentence? I am अगर आप ऐसे बोलोगे मैं उठ के चले जाऊंगा यहाँ से. Like it was very unnecessary melodrama around all things. So sorry, I am not treating this CricPe with too much seriousness, but
But
let's
I'm not
wish the
there.
man all the best.
So let's move away from Ashneer and just look at the product itself. I mean, there's very
Hmm.
little information out there. I'm just going by what he tweeted and what CricPay tweeted, which basically says that it's a fantasy sports platform around cricket, where every time if a cricketer does well as part of your team, the cricketer makes money.
Hmm.
Okay, and fans get to reward their cricketers. My question is, cricketers make a lot of money. Don't
Hmm.
fans want to make money by playing fantasy sports? So I mean, how is that a selling point? Is my basic question on a platform. Maybe he'll answer us. Maybe everybody makes money. But right now,
It
what
sounds a
was
little
there?
like NFT application in like fantasy sports. I don't get the correlation, and honestly, I can't even comment because it's not like I know very much about cricket. Let's be
Yes,
honest. But
yes,
wish him and his founder from Dubai all the very best, and I hope there's no
yes.
doglapan here.
He's calling it the biggest revolution in cricket since IPL. So
Of
let's
course,
see.
of course,
Let's see.
and he looks
Let's
a
see.
lot like Lalit Modi these days. So
But I'm just going by what you said, right, about the question that he was asked. And there was this
hmm,
interesting tweet by Devaya Bopana, who writes a bunch of the cred ads, a lot of the really, I think even Lenskart and a bunch of stuff as well was with him and Tanmay,
yeah,
where he spoke about how successful influencers are trying to become entrepreneurs by launching
hmm,
businesses and investing in startups, whereas successful founders are getting into content creation by actively upping their social media game. So he said basically people who are famous want to get rich and people who are rich want to get famous.
So Varun, what do you want to be, man? Do you want to be rich and rich or famous, or neither, or where in the spectrum do you lie?
I just want to be happy. That's all I want to say. I just
यार
want to be
इसे हटाओ
happy.
शो से, मतलब ये क्या है? Why you lying? First off, झूठे. What do you
So,
actually
okay,
want to be? I'll tell you
I
what
am
I
a
want to be.
successful founder who is doing content creation, but I didn't do it to up my social media game. I just did it because
Hmm.
that's what I originally always wanted to do. I wanted to make content. I got into this space to do that. Became a
Yeah.
entrepreneur by mistake.
Yeah. No, but I wasn't asking you to comment on your own success. First
Yes,
off, my question was,
always.
when
It's
given
about
the choice of rich
yeah.
and famous, I would
uh,
any day rather be like insanely rich, but just like
Same.
out of public eye and general public consumption and general public anything.
I, yeah, for me it's like a 70-30 in terms of rich and famous. So 70 rich, 30 famous would be my skew ratio.
Yeah. I am cool totally chopping off the fame bit. And you can tell, hence I am hosting a podcast in English on all things business and tech. If I really wanted to be famous, I'd be, I don't know, giving people life advice or some shit. But
Yes.
in any case, no, a good thread by, a good tweet rather by Divaya Bopanna. But let's
Devaya.
round off our
Devaya.
intro. अच्छा, okay, आप उसके दोस्त हो?
मैं जानता हूँ
That's why
उसको,
you're
हाँ.
clearing out his name. Acha.
हाँ.
Okay, no, but let's round us up with the biggest like chopsy of the past week, which was this Baiju's Akash Unacademy happening, not
Will they,
happening,
won't they?
news cycle. Crazy, man. This is like what's it called? Jennifer Aniston and oh my god, you're gonna kill me. Rachel and Ross. Ross and Rachel.
Yes.
Will they, won't
Yes.
they?
Yes.
Will they, won't they?
It,
Till they do.
it's that only.
So what
So,
so what happened over here?
so there are a bunch of articles. Right? One article came out, I think, was just TechCrunch, which said that Byju's is not going to acquire an academy. Now, there's one more article from Money Control saying that Byju's actually might explore a scenario where Akash, the tuitions academy that Byju's acquired,
Tuition
them
center.
in an
Yeah.
academy tuition center that centers rather and they're massive. Right, Akash is massive. So
Yeah.
Akash and an academy could kind of merge and go for an IPO straight. I think the good part of the articles, I mean, apart from the fact that nobody knows if anything is true, they might have just had like a chat.
Hmm.
Is that I think an article as well to kind of drill this whole thing down is to really see that to go towards IPO, everyone's kind of realizing that you got to have a set of parts together, and these two together seem to be an interesting combination where you get digital and offline, two strong entities together, kind of go into IPO. I also
Hmm.
kind of spoke about how Byju's is even functioning, right? As you become so large, you raise so much money that you have to,
Yeah.
your job almost becomes to make these parts kind of work and see what can go IPO, what can raise another round. Byju's, Ken rather said that is Byju's a hedge fund or an edtech company, but again, that's
Yeah.
Ken kind of generalizing and stuff like that.
Also, I mean, it's a fact of all large companies, man. At the end of the day, you have to become, multi entities. One can argue that anyone from the Meta Group to Google to Alphabet, Google
Yeah,
to
yeah,
LVMH, at some level, that's really what they are. They're investors making financial bets, and
yeah.
obviously, everything's very strictly comes down to a very strongly run PNL. But for what it's worth, at least Byju's is not in the news for some travesty type topic.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Because they spent like about 6 months there having a
Yeah.
pretty tough spell.
Yes, they did. Yes, they did. So now moving on to what stories we're going to talk about this week. We're going to talk about this interesting double-decker story that Morning Context did on the Indian startup growth story. We're going to talk about Blue Smart, the cab
Hmm.
service, which is and this was a great deep dive into them versus let's say an Ola and Uber, and let's get into the whole point of verification and blue ticks, considering what Mr. Elon Musk announced this week. All this and more. And if we have time, we might pop in an extra story in there. But that's what we'll talk about today. If my internet survives, till then, we have to take a break. We should take a break. Take a break. Come back. Think fast. Internet, stay alive. Stay alive, yeah. Come on.
Hey everyone, welcome to IVM Podcast. Here's what we have got in store for you this week. Listeners, presenting to you Club Cyrus Says, the premier tier offering for our podcast. Club members will get exclusive Cock and Bull episodes every Monday, extended and unfiltered versions of the guest episodes, access to the Club Cyrus Says Discord server, audio offerings such as ad-free episodes, and early access to the guest episodes. Also, members get to decide the topics of the live episodes and get their names on the producer slates at the end credits. So go to youtube.com/@Cyrus Says and click on the join button to become a member now. On How to Citizen, Meghnad and Shreyas talk to Marouk Inayat, journalist, news anchor and managing partner at Studio Talk. They talk about how women are changing the world. On Think Fast, Varun and Suchita talk about the presence of FMCG giants online and Mark Zuckerberg's letter to his employees. And on The Wire Talks, Siddharth talks to environmental scientist Dr. Anju Goyal about air quality and the role of air purifiers. Once again, do not forget to visit our merch store on ivmpodcast.com. We've got some super cool and exciting stuff up there for you and your loved ones. Follow us on social media. We are at IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. If you like our shows, then do not forget to spread the word. You know, it really helps us a lot. And of course, don't forget to rate and review our shows on whatever platform you are listening to them. All our video shows are also available on youtube.com/IVM Podcasts. And finally, we would like to thank our sponsors this week: LIC of India, Yono SBI, Cash Free Payments, and HDFC Mutual Fund. Thank you so much for making this possible.
Welcome back to Think Fast, where we are talking about the Indian startup growth story. Suchita, what do you have to say about this? I'm speaking very decently and very properly right now because you claim to say that I speak in weird voices all the time.
It's back. It is back. But let's talk about this story now that I'm finally waking up, guys. The caffeine and the food has hit, and my energy levels are resurrecting. So there was this interesting two-part article that went up on the Morning Context, and I think they tried to create some amount of excitement and energy around it. I don't know how far it went, but the TLDR of both of these articles, what essentially they do is they really they throw a lot of questions around the general sort of pitch of India's growth story, right? Because for the past 10 years of VC investing, specifically in all things startups, the big promise has been this creation of an Indian middle class. The number of reports that I have read where the timeline for this Indian middle class to be built keeps moving forward. You know what I mean? Like there'll be one report that will say by 2020, there will be 300 million Indians who will be, lifted into the middle class. And then that doesn't happen. So I think one big question was how large is the actual digital consuming audience in India? The second and the third question were largely around how, if you look at the VC ecosystem at large, it's been modeled around innovations that have happened in the US and China, and almost replicating some of that magic over here, right? You obviously Flipkart, the OG Indian, startup ecosystem bet is probably the biggest testimony of this. And then, obviously you have the likes of InfoEdge, which recreated a lot of, companies that originally came out of the US. But one thing that's amply clear is what's been made in America and China needn't necessarily replicate itself seamlessly, in the Indian context. And obviously the third sort of question has been, is our Indian problems really going to be solved by tech, or will it take a whole other way of investing, spending, building companies in India that will drive the kind of outcomes that public markets need to see? Because let's be honest, apart from Nykaa and maybe, but like Nykaa and Policy Bazaar, there haven't been those, and obviously Paytm's recovered a fair bit, Zomato's figuring its life out. There haven't been any huge, tech stories, at least on public markets. So I'm just giving you a summary of what the articles, the two-part articles covered. What is your immediate reaction or tippany to this?
If you look at it, what's really survived and thrived, and we've spoke about this, I think, last week, has been businesses that are built with a stronger foundation for an Indian market. Like we spoke about FMCG last week. We spoke about how they really evolved through the pandemic, etc. But a lot of the tech products either were trying to build for an international model that they thought would thrive in India, and for a consumer base they thought will grow in India. So I kind of do agree that at many levels, while tech cannot solve a lot of the fundamental issues, but I feel that this whole like India versus Bharat piece that was really kind of pushed out there, at the end of the day, you're building for Indian consumers who, across cities, across the board, and it kind of shows that the ones which are really doing well are ones which built it for an Indian market and not necessarily like cut, copy, paste and kind of evolve it, or like for a market that didn't exist in that sense. I don't know if that makes
Hmm.
sense.
No, it does, but here's where I'll push back slightly, right? Like every business, every startup that started out didn't necessarily start out to be this like IPO wonder, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one piece. The second is 90% of companies that have started up within the startup ecosystems, largely in tech, have really
Mm.
underestimated the amount of money it takes to build anything in India. I mean, look at the amount of money Amazon has had to plow, or even Walmart has had to plow, through its acquisition of
Yeah.
Flipkart in the Indian context. I mean, someone like a First Cry has Express Bees, as a sort of like sub entity for delivery purposes. My point is, it's not like India has this, very robust layer of infrastructure and warehousing and this, that, and the other, which make it easier to build plug and play businesses. So I think the second big thing that I don't think the two articles give recognition to is just the cost of building businesses in India. And I think the third and the
True.
final sort of piece is which I alluded to in the first point that I'd made, is every business needn't be built for public markets. So, for example, sure, right now ShareChat, may not be having the best time, given the
Mm.
amount of layoffs that they've had to go through. Their monetization is all over the place. They've made acquisitions, none of which have played out. MX Takatak being one of them. But
Mm.
ShareChat would have made a pretty decent bet for a Facebook and a Twitter acquisition. And in fact, it seemed like things were going to go that way because both Facebook and Twitter, if I'm not mistaken, have invested in ShareChat.
Mm.
So the point that I'm getting to is different companies have different journeys.
Yeah.
And I think the past 10 years have generally given people, or at least, I can speak on my behalf as a founder. I think the one thing that's amply clear is the second you step out of the first, or out of the top 30 million consumers and customers in India, the rest of them don't really value convenience. And the
Yeah.
problems to solve for that consumer base is going to be very, very, very different to just pure play convenience.
Yeah, and there's an interesting part in this article. They talk about like Big Basket, right? And its whole acquisition and how that was like a watershed moment. If you if
Yeah.
you think about it, for a lot of like, and they spoke about Dunzo kind of trying to get into grocery but not really being able to kind of scale up. Is the average cart size in general
Hmm.
for a broader audience is so low in India compared to anywhere else in
Yeah.
the world. The amount of sales you will have to do and then repeat sales you'll have to do, the same consumer,
Hmm.
will have to be so much more for you to even come towards some realm of profitability in the future. And so
Yeah.
I feel that's really the core thing. The core differentiator is infrastructure, like you said, right? And but I feel also it's about just the general cart size. People don't necessarily go for. I mean, it's people aren't hoarding. Like I feel Big Basket actually has done well for that reason. I feel Big Basket has always
Oh,
been a very strong product
2000%.
because they focus on this at a very mass market level. They were never trying to be something else. They never really, even if you look at their e-com service, etc., and some of the stuff they've done, right? And I don't know how much this product scaled, where they've gone to apartment buildings and really set up like fridges with basics in there. Like my
Yeah.
building has that. You go down with the app, scan the QR code, and you pay, and you take that product and go. They've done some of those very fundamental things, but they've also been able to do it at scale to increase cart size. But I don't know how much it makes sense for a Dunzo if I just want to get a Diet Coke and I just Dunzo one person to come and deliver it to me. That is terrible economics for Dunzo itself, right? And I feel that's really where things like e-commerce, some of the other pieces really went sideways because you didn't really consider how much you will have to do to scale.
But that's the thing, right? I think in India, business models are going to be sum of parts. There's no one who has built something truly formidable without having, without having a moat in the form of different engines running for them. I know now PhonePe and Flipkart have sort of, split internally, in the sense, it's still
Hmm.
within one holding company, but now they're, sort of run as subsidiaries. Jesus, what's wrong with me today? But that's the point that I'm making, which is it's just impossible to say that the thing that may have got you growth and may have got you adoption will be the thing that ends up becoming a
Hmm.
profit engine for you. And look at
Yeah.
Paytm as another great example. Paytm's real adoption happened through QR codes, scaling the way they did, obviously on the back of demonetization. But the thing that's really driving their business
Mm.
growth right now is lending, as a feature of
Yeah.
sorts. So generally
Yeah.
business models are going to be some, and I think that's where the mentality needs to shift, because I remember in our first couple of years of fundraising, I always pitch saying that LBB has to have multiple different streams of revenue, because that's truly the
Mm.
only way to really make that $1 rotate fast enough, right? And fast enough at a
Yeah.
cadence where you're able to create profits or something at the end of that rotation. And I always got that pushback saying, no, when you look at Excel sheets of international companies based out of the US, it's always one revenue stream. And until you don't scale one revenue stream, you shouldn't even think of the other. But jury's out on that, right?
Yeah.
Any Indian player has to, and let's take another example of Zomato. Zomato has everything from hyper pure to they've got that Zomato Gold thing mujig out again. Jury's out on Blinkit, but you know what I mean. They have enough. They have dine out. They have order in. They have
Yeah.
grocery. Swiggy also more or less is doing the same, but everything ends up being a sum of parts. And I think
Yeah.
in this scenario, what's truly been spectacular have been vertical players that have managed to scale up the way they have. Whether you look at Nykaa, Lenskart, First
Mm.
Cry for that matter. But
Yeah.
even if you look at their models, bro, what is in their model? It's private label is a key, sort of component. In some cases, obviously, private label isn't allowed to go more than 15 to 20 odd percent of the overall business. But there'll be inventory, which will be a part of the model. I'm just saying, business models are much more complex in India than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And just quickly, I know we've gone long on this story, but a few other sectors they covered were edtech and media. I think the edtech one is interesting, where I think one of the key things to really take away, right, is that everybody kind of assumed that taking things online would hit scale because you're giving access to everybody else. But
Hmm.
one of the core things is that you have actual coaching centers, because coaching is literally one of the core things that everybody from an academy etc was pushing out. The offline coaching centers actually operate 20 to 25% profit margins, EBITDA rather,
Hmm.
versus
Yeah.
the online ones operate at negative EBITDA because they're paying so much more to get those really, the prime instructors in that sense. So
Yeah.
which is why the online guys are actually going and opening up offline ones, and like Unacademy has had to do. So I think at some point the cut copy paste of how you kind of creating it for the digital space, which is different, rather than okay, can
Hmm.
we just make access available by putting it online, didn't really work out for edtech. But even think like, uh, I was reading the article about the whole K-12 piece. I think that's the name of the company where
Yeah.
they're literally getting sued by employees because they haven't been paid, and from by the founder, etc. So there's a lot happening in edtech where I feel at the foundational level they, I think, miscalculated how much the pandemic would shift how education works.
But Varun, don't you think 90% of these things were like, guys, are you being dumb? I don't. It's like like everyone was so excited about work from home. I'm just like, dude, the second TCS and Infosys are back to working from office, everyone else will also have to follow suit. You know what I mean? Like you end up sort of leaning back towards
Hmm.
actual ways of functioning and operating. So you're totally right. There was a lot of enthusiasm around all these segments, whether it's edtech or just e-com or whatever else at large. But human behavior will tell you that that's not how those categories work. So and I'm hoping
Hmm.
this funding winter that's happened, that's been brutal on founders. And
Hmm.
honestly, hats off to people who've had to build over the past 3 years. I mean, can you imagine? We've gone through a terrible lockdown. We've gone through 3 waves of
Yeah.
COVID. um, those 2 years were basically like funding dead silence. Then you finally had 6 months of respite in the middle, where there was a lot of activity happening within M&A and crazy investments and this, that, and the other. And now again, you're back to 1.5 years of nothing but a funding winter. And imagine in the Indian context, you throw the issues of poor infrastructure, insane com structures. Like our com structures and the ROI that you get from consumers nowhere match. I mean, that's something that we should have spoken about as a part of this story. How the hell are people earning so much money if
Yeah.
the consumer spending power isn't even enough to foot those kind of bills? But
Yeah.
this story, we guys can go on and on endlessly.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the last point on this story was literally the whole media ad revenue piece, is the fact that while people who are consuming video online increase exponentially, essentially the digital advertising economics are still quite bad. When
Yeah.
they attribute to ad tech solutions not being there, but I think in general, again, same thing, right? How much are people paying for ad units, or how much are because even our ad units are very cheap to kind of get. You actually see that
Our
even if you're a
CPMs are
YouTuber,
like
because of
the
terrible.
worst. Yeah.
And people aren't subscribing to content. As Indians, we
Yeah.
like free content. Brands like legacy media, they'll pay for that. So yeah, the media one is, I think, pretty straightforward. We all know that, and kind of seeing where that kind of goes. I think consolidation is the way that will kind of move in the future. But enough on this story. I think this story is long enough to be an entire segment. So the next story is, well, we look at this article and think, what do we do in our own lives? So we talk about Blue Smart. So for people who haven't used Blue Smart, if you basically not in the Delhi region or the Bangalore region, Blue Smart's almost like a throwback to what you actually spoke about tweets. I'm going to let you speak about that tweet first before we get into the story, because I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, so someone had tweeted, I'm forgetting who, others would have given them credit, that we started with Meru and then we moved to Ola Uber, and now it's almost like we're going back to good old Meru. And the manifestation of this good old Meru is in the form of this company called Blue Smart, which is what we're going to talk about now.
Yeah, and I'm again to explain the basic difference, right? Is that Meru used to own their own cab fleet, which meant they were responsible for the cabs, the cleanliness, functioning, everything else. Ola, Uber obviously don't function like that. The drivers largely the drivers own their own cars and they're part of the
They're
platform.
aggregators. Yeah.
And if you look at the Bangalore region, especially because there's so much out there on Twitter about this, is that Ola and Uber have become so unreliable in Bangalore, especially with the terrible traffic that the city now has. That Blue Smart seems to have done a couple of really smart things. One is they own their own fleet. They've come out as being really reliable. But what they actually do is they're not available everywhere, even in the city. They look at their most high traffic areas and they make sure the cabs are available there, which is smart economics. So you don't have like cabs spread out anywhere and anywhere. And people seem to be really happy with it. I haven't used the Blue Smart before, but you're a Blue Smart
I
consumer.
have. Yeah.
What's your consumer side for Blue Smart versus Ola, Uber?
So it's literally what you said, right? It's insane predictability. The cab comes on time. It's always very clean. The drivers are like super nice. I've used them a bunch of times to go to the airport. Dhruv uses them when he used to go to work in Gurgaon. And it's everything that you said checks the boxes. And even from I think specifically in a city like Delhi, safety is such a big concern. And I think with Blue Smart, even taking Blue Smart, late at night, I've never felt like यहाँ पे क्या होगा, you know what I mean, which you ended up feeling a little insecure in cabs like Uber, Ola. Also, no one responds to any emergency messages, and there's no customer care in this, that, and the other. Blue Smart really seems to have solved for a lot of this. And I want to read out one line from the article where this is covered, where the article says Blue Smart only plans to operate in 6 Indian metros, which cover more than 80% of the country's mobility market. Now, Varun, you tell me, if Blue Smart had gone out to the top Indian VCs in 2014 and 2015 to raise money, what would they have heard?
Yeah.
They would have heard, you're not ambitious enough. This isn't a big enough market.
Exactly.
Why aren't you going after more consumers?
You can't scale.
You can't scale. Up scale kaise karoge? Scale kaise karoge? But not to take it back to the previous story, but it's incredible that founders, have that chutzpah now to say, boss, this is the market, and it is what it is.
Yeah, and also think this whole point of you have to build to a certain level of scale is actually part of the problem as well, right? Is that you got to think about that. What scale is good for you to be profitable versus what scale is good for you to have, like, I mean, I know crores and crores and hundreds of crores of actual revenue versus actual profit. I feel we've always focused on the latter. And I feel slowly starting to focus on the former, saying, how do you build a business that actually makes solid profitability and scales in the smartest possible manner? I feel this makes sense because, I mean, I think some of the things I've done, right, which in the short term might not seem scalable, like the fact that they operate only on EVs, which means they're kind of anywhere that there is no network of EV chargers, they can't really operate. But again, the whole EV infrastructure is for the future. So they might actually sustain and grow a lot more in this. I also feel that the more you kind of function with an EV focus, autonomous vehicles, whenever they do kind of come in the future, this kind of plays very easily into that, because you are making sure you're part of the same kind of pipeline in that sense. So all in all, it's a great case study to look at to really understand how just like complete like utter scale, let's go like, for lack of a better term, like balls to the wall in that sense of the word,
Yeah.
versus this seems to make a lot more sense. But again, it's also them taking calls saying we don't want to scale to that level this quickly.
Yeah. I think one piece is that, and second is, it seems like they've also taken the best of both worlds. They've taken the best
Hmm.
of, Meru, which obviously had this full stack approach. And they've also peppered in things that consumers like about the Ola and Uber experience, right? Which is,
Yeah.
again, the ease of, booking a cab on your phone, the ease of being able to track the driver, having them turn up, where you need them to. So for me, it's a little bit of, maybe hindsight really is 2020, and them taking the best of both worlds
Yeah.
is what's led to this great experience that at least I've had with Blue Smart. I don't know what their financials are like though, because from this article, what it says is because the fleet is owned by Blue Smart, what riders is they get a certain amount of money irrespective of the number of trips that they make. So they're obviously incentivizing
Yeah.
drivers to be on Blue Smart duty, so to speak, irrespective of trips being made. Again, very unlike the Uber Ola model. So I don't know what the numbers are looking like for them, because those are the things that also brought efficiency, quote unquote, in the Uber Ola business.
Yeah, I was just like looking up, seeing who are the founders and what are they funding by. I found an interesting piece that the two investors in Blue Smart are Mukesh Ambani and Ratan Tata. Kind of makes
Oh,
sense now. Kind of
interesting.
all makes sense
Playing
now.
the long
Yes,
game.
yeah.
Playing the long
Um,
game.
Playing the long game. Who else do we know who plays longer games than those two? But
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's a
legends.
great model to look at. Also, great learning to see. I mean, obviously in the long term, we'll also see how this kind of scales up to really
Hmm.
understand the fact that focus on long term scale on profitability versus long term scale on or just scale for scale's sake.
Hmm. Absolutely. And on that, Satyavachan, next story is
Satyavachan, blue tick time. It is blue tick time. Were you ever obsessed with getting a blue tick?
no, I
Be
was not.
honest. Don't
Bro,
lie.
I am like so self
Be honest. I know you
actualized at
were.
this point in time. I really don't care. I really don't care. You, on the other hand,
So
have tried everything under the
I'm a
sun.
blue
You've
ticker.
posted
I've been
nudes.
a blue ticker.
You've gone on OnlyFans. You've
So technically,
now played with inanimate objects. You've done everything to get that goddamn blue tick.
so I'm a paying Twitter Blue consumer. I've been a paying Twitter Blue consumer for the last 3 weeks. I did not have a blue tick before that. I have a blue tick now, thanks to being a paying consumer. I have an Instagram verification tag, which I did not pay for, which I got through just putting the request on the app, and it kind of happened. But what I feel is interesting is that while if you look at it, and I think Shefali, but one of our favorite journalists to follow, tweeted this out. She's saying that verification was actually a way for it to just be a KYC, right? For you to verify it was
Hmm.
actually a legit person, and primarily for people who, let's say either public faces or journalists or politicians or someone who was, let's say, a founder, etc. It became this vanity thing that everybody wanted a blue tick, and like they were literally like, how many times have people gotten DMs on Instagram, other places saying, I can get you, verified for X amount of money, right? And half of those, more than half of those, I think 90% of those, 99% of those were all scams. That was the thing for so long. And now Elon Musk says, come April 1st, anybody who got it without paying for it on Twitter as verification tag loses it. You will only get the verification if you pay for it. So it makes sense, right? Thank God this whatever I am a blue ticker goes away.
Yeah, but I mean, Shefali also brought up another really important point, which is, what happens to people who can't pay that, whatever it is. What is it, 699 bucks a month or some such
Hmm.
thing
Yeah.
for being verified on the internet? Do they
Six
automatically?
something for if you buy it on web. If you buy it on the app,
Hmm.
because of App Store charges, it's higher. It's about 800 bucks.
But yeah, tomato. So, how many people can you literally just spoke about subscriptions of things like Netflix and MX Player and this that and the other before. Imagine wo kharida nahi ja raha hai, which you
Hmm.
still are high sort of like use case and better quality content platforms. Spending that kind of money on Twitter is seems to obviously only solve for the top X% of Twitter users. So one question is, just because I can't afford it, does that mean I'm not a real person?
Fair, but I also looking at the features I got, which is why I feel it's interesting to kind of use the actual verification or the Twitter Blue feature.
Hmm.
And one of the things we looked at, okay, do we get extra engagement? It's not a massive bump; it's a slight bump. You see lesser ads. You don't see as much ads as you used to. You get to tweet longer tweets.
Hmm.
You get access to longer videos in your tweets as well. All of these, if you look at it, are for power users, are for people
Yeah.
who I feel, if they're going to be using all these features the way they should, apart from just the vanity of it, they
Yeah.
can afford that money. um, I feel in general on every social media platform, verification needs to be a given. You need to have to be verified as a human being. Consider it takes away a lot of the toxicity. I know there's an
Yeah. I
entire
agree.
there are two sides. One is like, okay, you should have the ability to be anonymous on the internet, but I feel that anonymity in many ways also allows for so much misuse that at some point, even at the back end, you maybe don't want to show your face to the world, but the platform needs to know who you are. And I feel
Yeah.
that this kind of the payment of that $800 or $600 is valid for a power user. It should be only for a power user. Like me and my team honestly had this long conversation. Do we need to take this subscription? And we said, okay, one second, we do want to invest in putting longer videos on Twitter. We want to invest in putting longer tweets, and it made sense for us to do that. The higher engagement is something which I didn't even look at. It's like we were looking at a data sheet basis before and
Hmm.
now, and we saw there's a small uptick in that sense for what was very similar content. But what I feel will be interesting to look at is what Meta announced, right? Meta,
Yeah.
when they said a Meta Verified will come out, will not just give you extra engagement, which is what I mean. If you think about Meta, it thrives on that, right? Engagement is their core thing, keep people over there. But even like a simple thing like customer support, is that
Hmm.
you get access to more one-on-one customer support than someone who's not verified. Now, therein
Hmm.
lies an interesting thing also, is that all these platforms are finally saying, one second, advertising might be a terrible business for social media platforms. You are subscription
Yeah.
businesses where either you're there as a passive consumer, occasional consumer, where you get to see all these things, you're fine, nobody's going to hack you, nobody's going to do that stuff to you. But if you are becoming a power user, you will have to pay for these things. You will want access to X and Y and Z. I feel it's kindly moving to a direction where I'm hoping that it cleans up a lot of the mess that social media has. But again, I'm being hopeful for once about it. But I kind of feel it makes sense what he's doing here.
Yeah, so couple of small things over here. One, I don't think it's him making sense. I think this, like, Twitter should move to a subscription model. For example, Scott Galloway has been going on and on and on about this for
For
the past two
years.
years, at least on Pivot, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of it is Elon as much as it is, this could have been a part of the general sort of roadmap of Twitter. He's just
No.
had the balls to say, you
No.
know what, jump right to it, and let's make
And do it.
this
Yeah. Yeah.
let's really premiumize the platform. And I think that's the play that really is happening over here. Keep the consumers who can afford to pay, keep the consumers who, it's not even about whether they can afford to pay or not, it's do they value this or not. So for example, Apple made a big hoo-ha around all things privacy, and on the back of that appeal to a totally different type of instinct of a consumer, right?
Yeah.
Which wasn't necessarily a conversation up and picked up the charge on all things privacy, and then went all in on really cutting out tracking and this that and the other. I think here's my takeaway from all of this. This is the next 3 to 4 years of how to build consumer tech companies on the internet will be modeled off of things that we're learning from ChatGPT and Twitter. And I've said this before, I'll say it again. This is probably the only window founders and entrepreneurs will have to build companies where consumers will be taught to pay. It'll almost be like the training
Yeah.
of teaching a consumer to pay for information on the internet will be done by some
Yeah.
of the largest players that are out there. And all that you really need to do is figure out what are those additional one or two use cases on which for which a consumer will be willing to pay that incremental extra.
Yeah.
And obviously there are a couple of platforms who are already way ahead on this, right? I know we joke about them, but like OnlyFans is a great example, Substack is
Yeah.
a great example. But I really wonder, in the Indian context where bundling is happening to such a large extent, you have Disney Plus sort of figuring out how it's going to approach subscription. You've got Geo coming in with, the IPL and this, that, and the other, under their kitty. I wonder what the opportunities. Have you been thinking about this? Because I have. Like, if you had to build a consumer tech company today,
Mm.
specifically in this, let's loosely call it information media tech sort of space,
Mm.
there's so much that can be done.
Yeah.
But it goes back to the same question. I wonder what the Indian consumer's appetite is to pay for that incremental one or two additional products.
I feel it's one of two things. One is you're either building for a consumer who is a high spending consumer, or a very, very specific use case consumer. Um,
Yeah.
or you're kind of building something that can be part of a larger bundle. Because if you look at how India works, right, and we even assumed the OTT market was about individual subscriptions, it's not. It's about bundling within mobile
Household
plans. Like the
subscriptions.
amount of
Yeah.
access you get, everything from Netflix to Amazon Prime to everything else, because you are bundled onto, let's say, your Geo connection or your Airtel connection.
Yeah.
So can you be a core part of a bundle, which makes sense for you to be, or they want you on that bundle? Or does it make sense for you to be really focused, razor sharp on a certain kind of consumer who you know will spend shit ton of money? It's one of the other is what I kind of feel, because I feel mass market tech can only be done if you have a ton of money and play the long game. And you have people like a Geo, a Tata, etc., who are playing that long game. They have the ability to do that. I don't know if anybody can kind of come in as a brand new startup and do that. I mean, I can be totally wrong, but that's how at least I've been
Yeah.
viewing this from my end.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that point, man. Wow, look at you, Varun, dropping those hot nuggets like they're hot.
This is what happens when you
Amazing.
start getting back into startup
Congratulations.
mode. You start reading a lot of this stuff.
Wow, look at you, from snoozing on Think Fast to crushing with your Tiffany's. I love it. I love it. Please keep bringing that. What's it called? Bharatnatyam energy.
If this episode is buggy, it is because of my internet, and I've chosen to be in a separate room apart from my regular room, because there were two 6-year-olds screaming and running around the house. But nevertheless, TLDR has happened. TLDR, what was that? TMI. What does TLDR mean?
Yes. Too
What
long
is
didn't
TLDR?
read.
TMI happened. But what is your recommendation, since you have one ready?
I have two. Number one, ladies and gents, please brace yourselves for the 26th of March, because Succession final season finally goes live, and we will really have to put those VPNs to use. So I think that's one. And the second one, of course, is Ted Lasso is back. Ted Lasso came back on the 15th of March, and I have been watching the very sweet episodes of very sweet Mr. Lasso.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if you watch that show or not, but it's such a nice,
I
like,
didn't.
feel good.
Yeah, they just have the tone right on the show. It's just like a lovely show to watch. It makes I especially love that
Correcto.
whole. I know people have that first episode had lots of LinkedIn posts coming up about how a leader needs to be, but I really enjoyed that press conference part. Spoiler alert for everybody who hasn't watched
Yeah,
it yet.
yes, correct.
What is
And
my
the recreation
recommendation?
of that at the White House. But sorry, what is your
Yes,
recommendation?
my recommendation is we should all make trips away from cities if we live in cities, and go back to our hometowns. I did that last week. I was actually in my hometown. I made my 7-month-old son meet his 90-year-old great grandmother. It was nice. It was nice to kind of go back home to small town existence. Now it's small city existence in that sense. And kind of see how things have changed, but yet stay the same. So I think I recommend everybody should do that. If you have not grown up in a city, you should go back to your hometowns, make that trip.
Yes, make that trip. And obviously, I can't make any trips because I'm from the Delhi. From the Delhi. But how was your
From
trip,
the
man? Was
Delhi.
it sweet? Did
It
your
was lovely.
did your grandmom enjoy seeing your new kiddo?
Yes, she did. She enjoyed seeing the new kiddo. There was a lot of older folk popped over who I hadn't seen in a long time. So it was nice to kind of go back. I came back overloaded with carbs, so I'm on this very like stringent. I will not eat too much carbs diet right now, but apart from that, came back happy.
Lovely. Sounds like a sweet old tale, and you're glowing from
Yes,
within. Must be that
yes,
small town joy.
small town joy,
Andar se fulfilled.
and lots of sweets, carbs, and alcohol also does that to you.
Lovely. No, but I have nothing else to say. So should we just say bye?
And that is our cue, guys. That is our cue to say the end of the episode. We'll see you guys
It's the
next
end
week.
of the episode. I want to go and sleep and watch some bullshit on Netflix.
Yes, even I shall do the same thing. I've actually started to watch Billions again, by the way, because I realized that
Oh,
they
great.
recently announced that that Axe is going to come back next season. So I'm kind of catching up on that season I didn't enjoy when he wasn't there.
Acha, cute. Great. Lost me at
Chalo.
Billions and Axe.
Okay. Okay. Chalo.
But great
Toodles.
chat.
Toodles.
Bye,
Bye bye.
guys.
Bye
Thanks for tuning
bye. Bye
in.
bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.